Mexican market is a FOMO market. It's a fear of missing out market. So,
Okay.
It puts a bit of strain on us because you need to come out with a new beer every week or two new beers every week because otherwise you're no longer relevant. So obviously that puts a strain in our capacity. So the best way to get around that is collaborating with each other. So it's born out of necessity, but we really do it because we just like hanging out with other breweries and visiting their breweries and making beer with their breweries. So, but there is a market reason why we do that. Actually, let's say it's an added bonus as to why we do that. We would do it even if there wasn't a reason to do that. I think it falls back on sort of like the two fronts that I already touched on. The first one is it's just an ideal place. Like, why wouldn't you make beer in a country that has 5,000 different types of fruits and vegetables, and that has everything all season round? So it's not like Norway that you might get something locally on summer and then that's it. You're fucked. You're covered in 6 feet of snow. We have everything. We have everything at every season. So if it's not mango season, it's guava season. If it's not guava season, it's passion fruit season. If it's not that, then it's dragon fruit and whatever. So there's always something to fuck around with. And because we're such a culinary focused country, we don't just eat to survive. Eating is a social thing. You in Mexico, you do business by going out for lunch, and I know that sounds cliche, but it's like you literally have to go out to lunch, otherwise it's gonna be harder. Family events, there's always food and there's always drinks. Social events, there's always food and there's always drinks. You have a bank holiday, you have people over, you fire up the grill and you open up a bottle of mezcal. So there's always that component, and where food goes, beers follows. That's my vision of the world. So again, obviously the U.S. is a different concept because there's everything. Like everything that exists in the world you can get in the U.S. But in a country with its own limitations, it's always about the food and the drink and the people. So that is an environment where, for the most part, people are not afraid to try a different beer. Like I don't like dark beers, but okay, I'm gonna try it, and who knows? It might turn out to be the best beer you've ever had, or it might turn out to be shit. But people, they don't shy away. They'll try everything, even if it's just once. So, if I can get into them that way, then it's my job to give them a great beer, so then they get hooked and they come back. So I think those are the two reasons, because it's a food-centric and drink-centric culture, and people are not afraid to experiment.
That's great.
Yeah.
So you've been in Southeast Asia for what, about all of a week or so?
2.5 weeks now.
2.5 weeks. Okay. So Singapore, and then now the last 3 days in Vietnam. You got a chance to really check out the craft beer scene here. Yeah, and it's maybe only in the 4th or 5th year since it started.
Uh-huh.
Do you see similarities in what's going on here to what you experienced with the craft beer growth in Mexico?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, again, as I was saying, the countries in Southeast Asia, with their nuances, but they behave and they're in sort of similar places than countries in Latin America. Obviously, Mexico always tends to be the exception to that because we're literally right next door to the U.S. So the American influence on everything that we do, food, drink, beer, whatever, it's a big, heavy influence. That being said, the way that I see it is that, okay, so the U.S. has been leading the race for the last 30 years. They have the largest number of breweries. They have the most diverse brewing industry. It's gotten to a stage where it's no longer niche. You will go to Toledo, Idaho, and there will be 15 brew pubs in Toledo, Ohio. And, you know, the working class Joe, after a 9 to 5, will go out and will go to, you know, their brew pub and drink an IPA. Whereas before it might have just been, you know, a 6-pack of Buds.
Sure.
So that is kind of like the way that I see it. We are fortunate enough that we can look through a crystal ball and see what a successful beer market looks like in the future. Because none of this is reinventing the wheel. You know, America, you know, they blazed the trail, they did a lot of things, they invented the craft beer industry. So now we get to follow on their footsteps. We know what pitfalls to avoid, we know, you know, what to do, what works. We know about trends, we know about marketing, we know about that.
And you can certainly add to it.
Exactly, and then we come in and then we bring our own particular thing that sort of adds to that conversation. So the way that I see it is, if I were to play sort of a timeline, I'd say that 5 years ago, the U.S. brewing scene was 20 years ahead of Mexico. 5 years after that, it might only be another 5 years. So it's not a linear growth. You know, we've grown exponentially because we followed in that trail. Obviously, you know, there's, you know, in terms of quality, in terms of, you know, creativity, there's, you know, we're matched. And we collaborate, and we collaborate with a lot of U.S. breweries because we can have that conversation on like similar technical levels. The differences still rely on, you know, access to financing, access to like big like marketing agencies specialized in craft beer, and, you know, proper distribution networks and stuff like that. But we're catching up. And the way that I see it is, you know, Vietnam is also coming in from the rear, but like pressing like hell. It's like, you know, that last leg in the Kentucky Derby, like they're closing in for that win. So, and I see that same thing from, you know, from talking to you guys and talking to other people in the industry. So, you know, Vietnam is a very rich country. You know, it has a lot of traditions. Again, it's a very food-centric country. It's a very drink-centric country. It's a family-centric country. So it's literally that same situation. You guys are looking into the U.S. craft beer market for inspiration, but not as a copycat, because you want to build your own Vietnamese brewing scene, and, you know, ultimately that is what's going to get Vietnamese people to drink craft beer, because it's not something that comes from overseas. It's something that was born here, U.S. inspired, but Vietnam brewed. So again, the similarities are, you know, they'd be scary if they weren't so reassuring.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I love it.
All right, this is Sexy Meat Talks, and we're here with Adrian Rodriguez of Paracaidista.
There you go.
All right. We have Mark, we have Adrian, and we have Josh. Thank you for joining us today, Adrian.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. It's been an intense couple of days, so yeah, but no, I'm excited to be here.
We started off eating some sexy meats. What did you just try?
So I just had the American burger, and I was just telling Mark, you know, when I first got here. So I've been traveling through Southeast Asia for the past, you know, 2.5 weeks. I know that doesn't seem like a very intense, like very prolonged timeline, but, you know, when I travel like anywhere in the world, there's only two things that I care about: you know, eating local food and drinking local beer. So after a couple of weeks of intense Southeast Asian cuisine, last night, you know, drinking with some of the guys, I was like, man, I could really go for like a good old cheeseburger. So yeah, I saw it on the menu. It's like, I don't even have to think about it. I'm getting that cheeseburger, which was great, by the way. Great, really good cheeseburger.
Do you find many good burger places in the town where you guys are set up?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that there are like trends that happen, and they go like across the world. So, you know, a couple of years ago, it was like gourmet craft burgers, like, you know, the $15-20 burgers, and then so like fancy burger joints popped everywhere, every single corner, and then that sort of fizzled out, and then after that it was, you know, Chinese baos. So there were like Chinese bao shops everywhere, and then after that it was ramen, and then like ramen shops everywhere. So, but the benefit of that is that, you know, the really good burger joints stay, they survive, and the good ramen joints, they survive. So it just keeps on adding more and more stuff to the catalog.
So that really happens a lot in Mexico.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's funny that's a very true thing in Vietnam as well. When I first moved here, cupcake shops were the big thing.
We went through the cupcake fever
Cupcakes
as
were
well.
everywhere,
Yep.
and
Yep.
then as that started to die down, also right when I arrived 5 years ago, beer clubs. What was the beer club? One of the first beer clubs was Vuvuzela. And what Vuvuzela did is they probably painstakingly at the time, they round up whatever beer there was available.
Right.
The few imports,
Yep.
the Corona, the Belgium beer.
Yeah, the beer of the world
The
club.
Tiger,
Yeah.
the Heineken, every single lager, maybe even a Thai lager. So they had you could choose from 11 different beers where almost everywhere you ever went in all of Vietnam, not just the cities, it was, Saigon Red, Saigon Green, Saigon Special, or Tiger, or Heineken, and that was almost it. And then, Budweiser had just come to town, and so they had everything. And it started out kind of like it was trying to be, not craft, because there was no craft beer here, but a
It was
place
like
where you,
beer of the world kind of.
yeah, you could go in and choose from 10 or 15 different beers. And when it first opened, it was quite nice. It was, just, a little bit of Vietnamese barbecue on the menu. And you just come in. And then somewhere about the first 5 months in, they weren't getting busy. And the Vietnamese didn't get what was so special about it. They just hired DJs. Eventually, it was really well-endowed female DJs. And I don't even know that they were mixing anything. They were just jumping up and down and turning knobs in front of people, and it worked.
Well, isn't that what DJing is all about?
Yeah. So it turned, every beer club that opened after that was just music so loud you can't take it. And they just popped up everywhere. Boom, 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 just like you were saying.
Yeah.
The same thing. So it was cupcake shops, then it was beer clubs. What's the next thing? Bubble tea is one that just
bubble tea.
went crazy over the last 2 years. There's a bubble tea on every corner. There, like you said, a year or two from now, one or two really strong brands of bubble tea will be around. That'll be the only ones you go to. There's one or two cupcake shops left. There's
yeah, but I mean, ultimately, that is how Now, as I was just telling you guys before, food. If you understand food beyond just the fact of nourishing and staying alive and bringing nutrients into your body, and you look at the social aspects, you look at the cultural aspects, that food is not fixed. It evolves, it changes. It changes with culture clashes and with new ingredients and new techniques. So that's kind of it's the circle of life of food. It's bubble tea everywhere, and then 3 will stay behind, and then somebody will come up with something. But ultimately, when you look at that 10 years from now, you have a very varied food scene. And I think that's, I've actually been impressed about, on one side, obviously, yes, you expect street food when you come to Vietnam, but also, just the amount of non-street food joints everywhere, at least in this area. And in D1, it's just, to me, it tells me that things are moving and things are happening. So it makes for an interesting place.
Why craft beer? What got you into it? Not being able to get good beer, or was it something else?
I think it's a mixture of a number of things. So when I used to have a job that had me spend a lot of time in London. And obviously, I was fortunate enough to have, a very decent expense account. So obviously, we would wrap up for work around 4 or 5, and they're just, I didn't have a house to go back and clean. I didn't have to go back and do my laundry, so I would very naturally just go out to a pub and try beers, because I could try every beer that I wanted to. So eventually, after a while, I started sort of picking out my favorite craft beer bars, and this is at a time where craft beer was only just getting started back in Mexico. So before that, similarly to here, you could get beers of the world. So you'd get a Guinness, and then you'd get Tsingtao, and you would get something else, and you were amazed because it's different, and it's something unlike the beer I drink every day. So I think I was naturally predisposed to try different beers. So ultimately, I London was kind of blowing up back at that time. And you know how it goes. You become a local at one place, and then, you know, you get introduced to someone, and then that someone introduces you to someone else. And by the end of that project, I'd already met, you know, brewers and salespeople and distribution guys. So I'd obviously spend some time there not really kind of like eating into my paycheck because everything was paid for. So when that project was wrapping up, I said, you know what? It's, you know, I've had some amazing beer, yeah. But it really is a shame that the only way that people can have these beers back in Mexico is if they come to London. So I said, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to start a side gig, and I'm going to use some of this saved money, and I'm going to bring, you know, I'm going to literally buy a container of beer, bring it down to Mexico, and start an import distribution business. And if it all fails, okay, I have a lifetime supply of beer that I like. So that's kind of how I got started at a time where, again, craft beer was still, you know, in its infancy. So it was a bit of a hit and miss. You know, breweries were still, you know, getting to terms with quality. You know, there were issues. There were, you know, exploding bottles. There were like gushing bottles. So we came in, and I'd like to think that we contributed to the beer conversation by offering quality beer. So ultimately, people started buying from us because they knew that, you know, even though we were far more expensive, we had a better product. But ultimately, the industry evolved, and it changed, and it got better, and many places started falling back into this, you know what, we all of our ingredients are local, all of our drinks are local. We can't really keep buying, you know, import craft beer from you guys. Do you have any Mexican brands? And we sort of tinkered about with that idea, but ultimately I said, you know, we've already got the sales part down, but there's always kind of like that geeky beer part that's unfulfilled. So we said, all right, let's start a brewery. And that's ultimately how we got into that.
Cool.
When you were transitioning from being an importer and distributor into brewing, or possibly doing both at the same time, what did your early team look like? Did you have 20 people with you, 3 people?
No, we're still a very small operation by any account. So I knew a guy from like my early beer days, like my early import days, Carlos Cohen. He's now our head brewer. So in as many times goes, after a number of rounds of beers, we were kind of like bitching and moaning about, I have this great beer, but I can't sell it because everybody just wants to buy local. And he was complaining that, I have all this great ideas, but I have nowhere to try them out. So it's kind of like, bing, like light bulb moment. Is that all right? Let's partner up. So back at that time, it was Carlos that was in charge of the production side, which he still is. He's still our head brewer. And then I'd handle the sort of sales and delivery and logistics side. The team hasn't grown too much beyond that. We're still quite a close-knit team, but we're getting to that stage where we need to take that next step and kind of like add more roles into the team. But it was literally a product of kind of like two minds traveling in the same direction at the same time.
Awesome.
Yep.
Do you guys have a tap room or just a brewery?
So we have a production brewery, okay, which is actually a co-op facility that is sort of runs and is managed by 3 different breweries. So it's us and 2 other breweries. Kind of around the same time, we were all thinking that we needed to set up a brewery. So we came to this realization to say, instead of everybody pulling their own weight and having your own separate facility, why don't we pull in our resources and get a far better facility, much more efficient, much more managed. So there are things, it's an economy of scale kind of thing. So, because there's things that we all use,
That's awesome.
We all use bottles. So instead of everybody buying their own bottles, we'll just buy a container. We all use base malt. So instead of everybody buying, we just buy a container of base malt. So it has helped us to grow to a stage where we might not have been had we tried to do our own thing. So obviously, we had to invest a little bit more on the production side. We are hoping by the end of this year to have our first tap room in Mexico City.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I loved the bottle art. We got to try 4 beers last night, and I loved the bottle art, especially the one with Cthulhu on it.
Yeah.
I forget the name of the beer though.
At the Mountains of Maltness.
At the Mountains of Maltness. Oh, madness, yeah. Which was it 12.5%?
It was so the label says 11, but you know we had a very active yeast, so I think numbers might be between the 12 and 12.5.
Okay.
Right.
But the artwork struck me as being different in a great way. I don't know how to describe arts with any intelligibility other than that's good, that's not good, or I like that and I don't seem to like that.
Yeah.
Is that a Mexican style, or is it? What do you draw on from?
Well, it's not even a Mexican style. We're quite fortunate that we, again, through other people in the industry, there's a very famous digital artist in Mexico. His art's name is LD. EL space DEE, and he's actually he draws covers for like magazine kind of stuff, and like the big beer company commissioned him to do some artsy labels, but I'm not a designer, but I've always been very design focused, and the labels that you see now are not the labels that we started with. We had something completely different, but it was good, but I was never like 100% sold that is what I wanted. So we came out with this template and we said, ultimately what we do should be, and I know it sounds cliche, but it should be a work of art on the inside and on the outside. So we literally thought about, what does an art gallery look like? Oh, so you get a massive white wall and then you get like, boom, a big art piece. All right, so let's do that with our labels. Let's give a white background and just focus very heavily on the art. So we commission art from LD, and then we commission art from different other artists, and all of those are original works. And it's not like, oh, I saw this picture and I liked it. We sit down with them and say, we're going to do a Cthulhu themed beer with a punny name and sort of H.K. Lovecraft inspiration. We're like, okay, give me a week and I'll come back with ideas. Our Happy Saigon, the Belgian for the beach, was exactly the same. So we got a beer that's called Belgian for the beach. What have we got? Oh, so I'm thinking about like the hipster with the tattoos on the back, and I want to for it to look like Picasso, Cubist kind of stuff. So we don't meddle in the artistic part of the process. Would you simply say this is our vision for the beer?
Sure, you give direction.
Yeah, and come back and give me whatever you think.
It's like going to a tailor and saying, I want a blue shirt. I'm not going to tell you what it looks like, but I want a blue shirt.
Yep.
Yeah.
Basically.
Who do you guys use for the beer craft cans? Is that in-house?
Well, yeah, our brand of beer, we give very slang and inappropriate Vietnamese sayings on all of them.
Yeah.
And the artwork of the script was done in-house. I think originally our first labels were done by Astropig, the former marketing team with the Tay guys. Yeah.
I must have missed that one.
I think they did some of the early artwork, and then we've got some in-house guys now that know what script to use, and coming up with the sayings. It's come from all over the company, different people. We'll ask our staff, to come up with a name for a new beer, and like the marijuana beer, Am Sa. It was a funny Vietnamese saying. It doesn't mean marijuana, but when you highlight parts of it, they get it. So we went a different direction with it. We do have actual artwork of characters for each of the beers,
right?
And it's very, I would say, kind of Ren and Stimpy inspired.
Yeah. It's like Garbage Pail Kids almost.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah, but
I mean, ultimately, when we decided to go back to the drawing board on the design of the labels, Mexico's still a very bottled focused market. More and more tap rooms are sort of popping up, but that's still, we will go to a restaurant, we'll say, I can offer you a keg. It's like, no, you know what, I want the bottles because people like to have the bottle sitting on their table, and people like to drink it, and if they like it, they want to keep that bottle, sort of as a memento. So we knew that we were coming into a very sort of competitive market, and we decided, we need our labels to stand out, and less is more. So we took out like all the Ren and Stimpy-ish kind of designs, and we just left a blank canvas with an original art piece right in the middle and the name of the beer, and that's it. And people have liked that so far.
Yeah, I very much thought of it that way when I looked at them. Not unsimilar. A lot of wine companies tend to feature that style in some way. Like you walk through a section of wine, and sometimes I do. I gravitate towards one because it's just an interesting original artwork on it, and then it's a cab from this region. Okay,
yeah,
I'll give it a try.
Yeah, so,
and there is that effect. Maybe not totally in Mexico just yet, but in the U.S., when you walk through a craft beer store, it's like, what am I looking at?
Yeah.
There's a freaking million of them.
And I mean, ultimately, there's a reason behind that as well. We want to give. So we have the year-round beers, which is the one that you guys tried last night, and then we have seasonal beers, and then we have the big barrel-aged sour program, or the high-gravity program. Darker, stronger kind of beers. And so every beer that comes out and gets added to our yearly rotation, LD manages that art. So it all kind of looks and feels the same. And then when you look at the seasonals, they're a bit more abstract, more designy, but they all kind of look the same. And then the sour beers and the specialty beers, they are big 750 ml bottles with like really creative and really professional looking art. So when you look at it, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm willing to pay this amount of money for this beer because it plays the part. So everything that we do, whether it's on the production side, whether it's on the marketing side, or on the branding side, if we're not going to do it to a level where we think it's the best that we could absolutely do it, we're not going to do it. We won't half-ass anything just for the sake of having a beer.
It's a very good habit to have.
It's a very good habit to have. It's a very expensive habit to have, especially when mistakes happen and beer doesn't always turn out the way you want to. So it takes balls to drop 300, 500, 1,000 liters of beer that you know that it doesn't speak for you, so it has to go.
Yep.
Now, many brew pubs, restaurants will pair up with farms or co-ops. Do you do any work with local ingredient producers?
So we do that. So, for example, the Mexican lager that you tried last night, it has a percentage of blue corn, which is a traditional blue corn, which is grown in a family plot that's owned by our second head brewer's family. So we actually buy the corn from him. So we add that the corn to that beer, not to cheapen cost, because it's actually far more expensive because it's unmalted corn. So we have to go through the whole malting and milling process. But ultimately, we buy from that because we can trace the origin of that corn. We could literally drive up to his parents' house and look at the harvest, and we know what we're going to be working with. For our sour fruit beers, we know the growers, not all of them, but we know some of them. We know certainly we have our guys. So we have our fruit guy, we have our vegetable guy, our spices guy, and it's not hard to trace where those ingredients come from. Obviously, once we start going deeper into the barrel aging and the long-term sour process, then we really want to get into the communities, and we really want to do something that kind of goes full circle, sort of a farm-to-table approach on those beers.
That sense of security must be nice, though, if you have a couple of sources that you can just trust, that you can verify, but you don't have to worry so much about that.
I mean, the reason why we do that is also because the approach, not always, but some of the times when we have the tank space and the resources and the creativity, we will just go out to the market. We don't have any particular beer style in mind or an ingredient in mind, and you can just talk to the producers and the salespeople, and they'll tell you, you know what, mango season this year, not as good, but the guavas and the pink guavas and the yellow guavas that come in, they're just great. You should go and talk to the guava guys. And then we go and talk to the guava guys, and they'll give you a small taste, like, okay, we'll buy guava. And then once we get the ingredient, we'll say, okay, now we got the guava, what do we do with it? Do we make an IPA guava? Do we make a Berliner Weisse guava? But it's kind of like the other way around. We work with the seasonality of the fruit rather than the other way around.
Well, it seems smart. I mean, you can't really fight that. So.
I mean, not only can you fight that, but ultimately, fruit in season is cheaper than fruit out of season, and it's better and it's fresh. So there's logic to operating it that way. So, for example, one of our so we have a Berliner Weisse with red berries. We call it Chuck Berries Goes to Berlin, and that's it's won multiple awards in beer competitions around Mexico, and that's a really funny beer because that was one of the first kettle sours that we brewed. We were very fortunate to be sort of mentored into sour beer by Charlie Johnson, one of the greatest sour brewers in the U.S. He's a really good friend of the project. But it's a beer that we can't say how much beer of that we will make every year. We only brew it once, twice, perhaps. And it depends if we find the right berries. And if we can't find the right berries, sorry, we're not going to make this beer this year.
Sure. Now, speaking of fruit, Vietnam is Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
In general is known for its fruit. Let me pause 1 second. Would you like another beer?
Yeah.
Can we get a soda?
Can I have a tiger, please?
Tiger.
Yeah.
So back to sorry.
Yeah.
So Southeast Asia is well known for its fruit and food and rice. But since we've just been talking about fruit, have you come across any interesting discoveries?
So I don't think discovery is I wouldn't say it's a discovery because of sort of geographical similarities, Southeast Asia and Mexico kind of like fall along the same tropical line. So there are many things that
passion fruit, chayote, all these things are here too.
Exactly, they're here too. What I love about some place like Vietnam is that same fruit that I have back home has been used in completely different ways in Vietnam as we would use it in Mexico. So, you go out and you see,
Well, example is, the chayote is the fruit.
Yep.
In Vietnam, they use the leaves to make a tea.
Yep.
Artichokes, they dry them and make tea out
Yeah.
of it.
They offered me one this morning, and I wasn't too sure if I was listening to that correctly. So, it's not the discovery of new fruits because, I come from a very bountiful kind of place. It's seeing how that fruit has more uses and more facets and a bigger personality that I am used to. And then that inspires me coming back to say, well, while I was in Vietnam, I saw people do this, so let me try it back home. So I think that's kind of where I see a lot of similarities, but it's like that when you say same but different.
Yeah.
Have you made any Sapodilla beer?
We haven't so far, no.
That's something that the brewers around town have done already here. Here it's called Saboche. It's a sweet caramel apple.
Yeah.
I've actually seen both. I've seen Sapodilla on some menus, and I think it's Sapoche.
That's the Vietnamese way.
They
Sapodilla is what they
actually
call it in
mix it.
Mexico.
Oh, okay. They many Cinto places, which they'll mix it with like coconut and coffee.
Okay.
And Sapodilla, and it's delicious.
No, we've there's at least in our current capacity. Obviously, we hope to grow over the next couple of years and be able, particularly with our brew pub coming online, allowing us to be able to do more small batch, more specialty kind of beers, and but there are there's hundreds of ingredients and thousands of permutations on those ingredients that we could probably go 5 years without having to repeat a single variation of fruit. So. And again, I think that's something that ultimately will define us as a Mexico brewing industry, and will grow up to define the Vietnamese brewing industry by itself. The ability to work with what you have and using that as a vessel for your creativity. Whether it's food, whether it's beer, whether it's distilled, it's the same.
Very cool.
Yeah.
One thing I do kind of miss about being in America is the type of avocado.
Okay.
It's very, very delicious, very tasty over here, but for me it does taste different. There you go, Mark.
No, and you're absolutely right. Avocados here. Thank you. Avocados here are different. So we grow the Haas variety of avocado, which is smaller but tends to be creamier and fleshier. And that's ultimately the avocado that kind of like took over the U.S. And I know, again, I'm not a biologist, but I know that it grows well in only certain areas of like certain parallels.
Yep.
Mexico and Michoacan, which is
Like
the avocado region. Exactly. Exactly like coffee. It'll grow very well in that. So it could perhaps grow in Vietnam and in Southeast Asia, but it's not going to be the same.
I think it's too wet here, actually.
I've
been told that anecdotally.
Yeah.
There is and it's only available part of the year when it's right. There is some people growing that tasty
really?
avocado here. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Jeff had it on his menu at the Village Grill.
Oh, I'll ask him about it. I honestly didn't know that.
They just threw a shout out to Jeff at the Village Grill again.
Yep. Basically, we have a deal. If we do that 10 times, Jeff gives us free burgers.
Okay, so that's 2 now. You got 8 down. That's 3. You got 7 more to go. No, I mean ultimately, the downfall for us is that I remember growing up when I was a kid. We could go to like a 7-Eleven in the corner, and they would have like this beautiful, massive, delicious avocados for like nothing. So my memory, my food memories growing up as a kid, lunch. Back at my parents' place when we were kids, it always had, tortillas and avocado. That was always there. No matter what you were eating, there was always tortillas and there were always avocados. So for me, it's been the most natural thing for a number of years to eat avocado. But suddenly, they become like, somebody invents avocado toast, and, suddenly I have to pay $2 in Mexico City for a shitty avocado, because obviously the best avocados are being sent to the U.S. and China.
Terrible.
So we're on the losing side of the avocado war at the moment.
I'm sorry to hear that.
It's okay, but then you get sort of like the reactions. Obviously the big corporate farms are exporting to China and the U.S., but now you have the individual sort of family farms that, on Facebook they'll say, we have, every week we'll come to town, we'll set up a little pop-up shop on the corner of such and such. Come in, buy 1 kilo, 2 kilos. You can get a combination of like ripe or like will be ripe in a week and will be ripe in 2 weeks. So you have like 3 weeks worth of avocado. And that's kind of like the resistance for people that it's not a trend, It's, I've been eating avocado my whole life. I just want to be able to find an avocado.
Long live the resistance, the avocado resistance.
Vive the avocado resistance. So, I mean, in one way it's good that, people around the world get to try avocados. The problem is that it's mostly rich white people in rich white countries that get to try the avocados.
Yeah.
But anyway,
money and resources.
Food, like Jeff Goldblum would say, but I would speak is like food finds a way. Like there are,
Cheers to that.
I'll drink to that. Cheers.
Because inclement weather, it kind of happens. I mean, we've been lucky; it hasn't been like super windy, but there's some days where the wind it actually can be like a loud club.
Right.
Like you can't talk.
No, but I mean, what I've seen is that it's very, it's fast and it's furious. Like it'll come down like this, and it will last like 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and that's it.
Yep.
Mexico City is actually the opposite around, because it rains practically every day all a little bit like this, perhaps slightly stronger. But it will, it will start at 5 or 6, and it will last until 8 or 9, and then it's just like somebody closes the tap, and that's it. But the problem is that it always happens once everybody's leaving work, so traffic and chaos is just a nightmare.
Actually, you missed a hell of a rainstorm on Saturday. You came in on Monday?
I came in on Sunday.
Sunday.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a little rain on Sunday, but Saturday was the same.
And I felt like it's the wettest I've ever been. I'm going to say it. Wettest I've ever been in Saigon. Coming over the bridge, I was going maybe 10 kilometers an hour, probably slower. The wind was just knocking me around. I was just like, just gotta fucking get home. Gotta fucking get home. Driving super slow. Fortunately, I have a visor, but
right.
it was just if I.
But your visor gets wet as well. So yeah. No, I mean I gotta say, I mean obviously Mexico is a big sort of car. Mexico City particularly is a very big car city. We do have massive public transportation, but it's a city of 22 million people. And some people actually drive very long commutes to get to work. So, we don't see that many scooters. So as very Americanized, everything has its own lane, and you have and here it's just it's a very organized chaos. But you have coming in from the left and the right, and from behind you and above you, and it's like all over you, and it's just it takes some time getting used to.
It's jarring. But if you just go with it, it does for the most part work. It has its problems like any sort of traffic.
Yeah.
But just don't. Advice to anyone coming here and who wants to take a motorbike around: don't fight it. You're not going to change habits. Just go with the flow.
Yeah.
It's the safest thing to do.
And
understand that people are not trying. It's not a fuck you and they cut you off. That's like kind of a Western.
Yeah. Western mindset.
Yes, it's Western thinking. That's not what they're doing. That's just the way traffic works here. And until you live through it and you experience it, you probably can't fully understand what I mean. But like we're in the West, we're so used to queuing and being in line.
I get it, and I drive in it every day. I still do. There's, if you could hear internally what's going off in my head, it's still just a bunch of expletives. It's just
I
nonstop. Fuzz nut, rope dick, cocksucker, motherfucker. It's a continual looping track as I drive down the road. Yeah. But I don't beep or swear at anyone, and I have to let that go.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those.
I think that's human nature.
Yeah,
traffic just sucks. Period.
Traffic, I don't know anybody.
It's not how each culture deals with it. No culture likes it.
Yeah, nobody. I don't know any single person that likes being stuck in traffic. So. But
I had one student the other day, because I'm a teacher, I had one student who we were working on PowerPoint presentations. He made a presentation about how much he loves traffic, and it was beautiful. It was a sarcastic masterpiece. And it was, but he very tongue-in-cheek, but he kept a straight face, and he went through the presentation, and he's just like, in relatively good English, he went through, like, I appreciate that I can save money, because I don't have to smoke cigarettes because I get it from traffic. And that was my favorite line of the whole thing. I was just like, I was the only one clapping in the room, but I was just like, man, this is great.
Sarcasm is a universal language. But actually, that actually brings a question that I wanted to ask you guys. I mean, obviously,
sure,
coming from a more, I hate the term, but more westernized country, obviously, we've gone through the whole shaming on smoking and making it harder for smokers to smoke, essentially. And as somebody who invests a considerable amount of time in making a beer experience, because as you obviously know, the first thing that you get from the beer is smell, especially if you're working with amazing hops and amazing fruits. We are blessed to the fact that there are practically no indoor smoking places where we serve our beer, and even outdoor sort of beer hall kind of like trailer park spaces, less and less people smoke when they're having a craft beer because they know that they have to get the full experience. I see that is not the case in Vietnam. So I mean, my question would be, you know, you obviously can't be the one who says, oh, you can't have a cigarette while you're trying my beer because you're going to ruin your experience. So ultimately, the customer's always right. But where is, you know, is there a balance? Is somebody trying to get that balance, or is everybody just said, screw it, they're going to smoke, so yeah.
Yeah, well, you know, I can answer on our beer craft stores. Smoking is still it's not illegal. It's not illegal in restaurants. If we don't have an ashtray on the table or a smoking area, we hear from the customers. It's the other way around.
Right.
Yeah.
But what we've done at Beer Craft, you just saw the District 1 on the pub crawl.
Yeah, on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Yeah.
Okay, so that's one of our smaller stores. And then last night we were at Van Viet Chan, which is our smallest store. Our other beer crafts are much larger.
Yeah.
They have an indoor aircon area, which there's no smoking allowed in it.
Right.
And there's a large outdoor area, and people don't mind as long as they have a place to go and smoke.
Right.
So at those locations, if we have the beer geek who doesn't want to smell cigarette smoke while he's really digging on the
geeking
beer,
out,
he can.
Right. Okay.
So we try to make both options available.
Okay.
Is our, and we always like having so, you know, well, the District 1 you went to, the downstairs is air conditioned and there's no smoking on that ground floor.
Right.
But you go upstairs to the next floor in the rooftop, there's
An open area.
windows and a smoking area. We had a fully air conditioned location in Tan Binh district, and we had customers complaining that they don't want to sit upstairs because they have to go all the way downstairs outside to have their cigarette.
Right.
So we opened up the windows on the top floor, and everyone's happy. There's an air conditioned area, so it's quite the opposite here still.
Right. Okay. No, but I mean, it's good that somebody has the option to enjoy, you know, and to really geek out on their beer in a non-smoking environment. So, but yeah, that's. I mean, you asked me, like, what are the things that have kind of like shocked you about Vietnam? I think that probably be one of them. I mean, I still remember. I mean, I still remember the days where you could smoke in bars and clubs and restaurants, but we've just gotten so used to the fact that now you can't, that it's kind of like a little shock to the system when you go back to that.
I think American cigarette companies have done quite a number on Asia. I mean, there's a lot of Asian tobacco companies as well, but how easy it is to find a American branded cigarettes here is a little disappointing. I'm a former smoker. I did used to smoke, so I know it's a little bit hypocritical, but I do think that younger people smoke a lot less here,
Okay.
than older people. I worked at a university for a while, and I was a little surprised when I did see a kid smoking. Very, very uncommon.
Right.
I knew of 4 students. Now they're university, so they're adults. I mean, it's their right to if they want. But I taught probably more than 100 students over the years, and I can only think of 4 who smoked, all men.
Right.
But I think that's something that's changing.
Right. So, and the other question that I wanted to sort of ask you guys, I mean, we've obviously, because I'm here and, you know, you're kind enough and foolish enough to have me on your podcast, sort of talking about the Mexico craft beer scene, but I also want to sort of ask that same question of you guys, right? Because you're the guys that are based here, and, you know, you're the guys pushing, you know, certainly beer craft. You know, I see practically everywhere that I've gone through in Saigon and Hanoi, I came across a beer craft. So on that, great job, guys. So what is your perspective of the Vietnam craft beer scene? Where is it going? You know,
when I first moved here, I moved here maybe 2 months after Mark moved here.
Mm-hmm.
So we came here about the same time to live. He had been here several times before that. but it's grown from 3 microbrews at the time I arrived. I'm pretty sure I'm right on that chronology. To somewhere around 25, maybe close to 30 now. It's booming. I do not think it's saturated in the country. It may be a little bit saturated in certain parts of Ho Chi Minh, but as someone, I don't invest in any microbrew location, nor do I work for one. But as an outside observer who gets to peek into that world, and I get to talk to a lot of awesome people in and around, like Dave Byrne and a bunch of other people that we were talking about earlier. It seems like the collaborative nature has only gotten stronger, and it seems maybe not month on month, but quarter on quarter, it's just getting healthier and healthier.
Right.
So unless I'm missing something, I think it's got a slightly exponential growth.
Okay.
And right now, it seems like it's hitting a certain turning point, though. New guys kept jumping in. There was I don't know if you heard of Broken Bridge. Then there's so many I can't think of all the names, but Seven Bridges more than a year ago came out of Da Nang.
I'm thinking of Seven Bridges. Yep.
But all these people jumping in, they're starting to be Vietnamese kids, young guys,
Right.
who maybe spent a little time in the U.S. or just really love the scene here. They're investing in 500-liter systems, turnkey, imported from China operations. They're dropping $100,000 to $150,000 on equipment and just jumping in and not really knowing what to expect.
Right.
And we've just started to see this year a couple of them close down in their first year of operations. The people that all started 4 years ago, they were able to, like I think what you said, we could play around with it for a year before we were selling beer that probably wasn't the best quality in that first year, but it was all there was. So nobody complained. But right out of the gate, it was Pastor Street, it was ourselves, Platinum, Fuzzy Logic, those 4 companies. Everyone involved in each of those companies, I know all of them. Really, Pastor Street and Platinum kind of raised the bar because they came in with, their beer is right here. If you're not as good as them, you're not going to stick around.
That's the bar.
So there was a trail blazed, and those first 4 brewers, Fuzzy Logic was, Max and Colin, Josh. Max knew what he was doing, and he had a quality that was right here and right on that level. The consistency wasn't as good as it is now for some of those. Now they, Fuzzy Logic, Pastor Street, Platinum, they've continued. All of them have continued to improve, but everyone that joined in that first year, the Tay, the Lock Brewing, the Rooster Beers, and then Rooster Beer is making a lot of our beers for us. Their beer in year 1, of course, it was better in year 2, but by the 3rd year was when Heart of Darkness, East West, Winking Seal, they came in with budgets, and they bought the equipment that we started out with plastic buckets and
pots and pans. Yeah.
and that the window's kind of closing for that. Those people that are doing that right now, they're borrowing or just trying to jump in and get some money, and then it's like, oh crap, how much beer do I got to sell to pay for this? It's like, well, the infrastructure, the distribution, the tap rooms, having a place to deliver it. I think it's going to be changing over to people just jumping in and figuring it out, to bigger breweries already established in other places coming in and setting up with big operations right from the get-go. So, and it's going to be harder and harder for those little guys to catch up. It's already that development phase is
Yeah.
kind of gone.
I mean, early mover advantage is always an important thing.
So like where is it going next? Is that's where I think it's going. It's going to these established ones continue to build up their productions and increase their distributions, and big companies that already have that in other places jumping in with here's a $2 million investment, go.
Yeah.
So which it doesn't mean there's not room for tons of growth, because the 10 or 15 really established breweries, maybe that number's getting close to 20 now. We're not even a tenth of the 1% of the market right now. We're just getting our footing on the base,
All right, well, Adrian, thank you so much for talking to us today. We wish you luck with Paracaidista. And is this your last stop in Asia?
So this is my last stop in Asia for now. I must add, for now. I definitely do need to come back. I mean, one of the reasons why I've been spending time in Singapore and in Asia and Hong Kong and different countries is just to get a sense of the industry, and because we want to be, we want to grow as a Mexican craft brewer, and the way that we're going to grow, it's not going to be in the U.S. because that market's already saturated. It's probably not going to be in Europe because that market's already saturated, but it will definitely be in Asia. Again, because of all the things that we already talked about, the similarities, the same challenges, the same moments in industry, and I'm really excited. I have to say, I fell in love with Vietnam over the last couple of days, so this will certainly not be the only time that I'll be here, and hopefully next time it'll be with a container full of cold beer.
Can't wait to see you back.
I look forward to that, and thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah,
It's been
thanks so
a
much, man.
pleasure.
All right, thanks, Adrian.